Good morning, everybody. This year's Legal Marketing Association Continuing Marketing Education Conference focused on the nexus of change. All of us, whether you're a law firm marketer, whether you're a law firm administrator, a managing partner, or just a lawyer who really gets marketing, all of us are at the intersection of the tremendous changes happening in the legal profession. There's competition from tier firms. There's alternative legal outsourcing providers are bringing more competition. There's the emphasis on diversity, and I'm sure you can continue the list. And what this conference really aimed to do was to give everybody the up-to-date knowledge about what's happening with these forces, and to give us the skills to harness them so that you can make them work for you instead of being swept away. So thank you very much for joining me this morning. We're going to be looking at the 8 key takeaways to riding the wave of change. My name is Sharon Berman. My company is Berbay Marketing and Public Relations. We create the visibility and credibility that fuel revenue growth, and we specialize in working with law firms. Okay, nexus of change. The conference co-chairs, Jennifer Meir and Melissa Hoff, did a great job in pulling an agenda together and having a conference that went off like clockwork. There were 3 levels of what they were the information they were trying to impart. The first was the macro view of a changing industry, giving an overview of what the trends are and an update so that we really knew what was going on today. Second aspect was, what are the changes impacting management? And the third aspect was, how do we manage ourselves? What do we need to know about self-management, and what do we need to know about change and managing through change so that we can make this all work for us and not only withstand these changes, but really be proactive in terms of grabbing onto them. So the first session was Debra Baker. She's Managing Director of Growth Play. She used to have a company called Law Leaders Lab, and she really works with firms to create change and really says to them, okay, just because we've practiced law this way so far doesn't mean we have to do it the same thing going forward, and encourages her clients to take a blank sheet of paper and ask, what if? What if you could be a firm that had the best, most profitable clients? What if you retained the best talent and people? And what if you had a firm that could also give back to the community? And she works with them to create great law. And the components of great law are great lawyers who are also great at business, and they're also great people. Now, this is the kind of firm that we would all like to work with, whether you're inside or whether they're clients. You really, the kind that motivates you, that you know cares about you, wants, and makes you care about the business and your client. And the hallmarks of great law, the hallmarks of successful, high-performing firms are a strategic focus on people, profit, and purpose, client expectation cultivation, clients having a tremendous experience, and ongoing great law innovation, that the innovation never stops. So it was very thought-provoking in terms of thinking about that what if and thinking about the blank sheet of paper and what would you do differently today. The key takeaway here is be a champion. She encouraged everybody to go outside of not only the conference, but go outside of your firm and talk to other people and talk to them about what great law might be and what you can do. Also look at your tools, look at finance, look at operations, look at the resources you have and what can you do. And then develop a game plan. See who within your firm is on board or where you can start. It starts somewhere. It starts somewhere. So what can you do to start moving the firm to great law? That's the key takeaway. Okay. This was a very interesting session, pricing, procurement, and the roles of legal operations. And it's an organization called CLOC, Corporate Legal Operations Consortium. This is the first time I've heard of this organization. I have to tell you, we are going to hear a lot more about it. This is a group, and this is, you can see everybody on the panel here. CLOC is an organization that has been around in an ad hoc form, an informal form for maybe 8 years, but it formalized a couple of years ago. They had their first conference maybe a year or two ago. I had 500 people. Last year they had, this year's conference had 1,800 people, and their next conference in April of 2018, I'm sure, will be even larger. These are people who work in-house in corporate legal departments, but for the most part, they are not lawyers. They are there to run the business. They are the business advisor to the corporate legal department. And this is a very new position. It's an emerging area, an emerging field of legal operations. And because traditionally in-house legal departments really haven't focused on their own efficiency, their processes, their own project management, looking at budgets, pricing. For instance, they may have looked at budgets in terms of outside, what do they spend on outside counsel, but in terms of like operating as an in-house business department, of course there are exceptions, but what these people want to do is create best practices and optimize legal service delivery so that it's law firms working with outside law firms, working with alternative legal service providers, optimizing the delivery of legal services. And for instance, they're looking at best practices. They're looking at creating a standard RFP among all corporations, or among everybody who are members of this group. I mean, wouldn't it be great to have a standard RFP that you receive as opposed to, so many different varieties and just not, it would be able to create, compare apples to apples and just be more efficient in your own practice of responding. So they're looking at all of this, and it's, as I said, you'll hear more about it. They talked a lot about collaboration with the in-house legal department and the outside law firm, and they talked a lot about, of course, offering value, saying, consider different fee arrangements for different matters, not the same thing across the board. This to me was very interesting. They said law firms need to use simple technology. And Mary, the woman from Google, and who's not going to listen to Google, said, listen, if we get a response to an RFP and the law firm is telling us they don't have DocuSign, they're going to get demerits. They're going to get points off, because if you're not using the simple technology, and she said law firms tend to be resistant to things like DocuSign. She said, you're just going to, that's simple technology. That's just table stakes. So that, I thought, made people sit up. Okay, be prepared not to make a lot of money off of your associates, because that's not where the value is. And she talked about, they all talked, this whole panel talked about trends and opportunities. And because Connie Brenton, the head of CLOC, was I don't want to say spearheading, but was also one of the main spokespeople and to talk about these things. In the current corporate legal ecosystem, they said, in general, 20% of the budget goes to legal outsourcing, and what they want to do is move that to 50% of the total spend. And outside counsel would represent 80% of this 50%, and then alternative providers would be 20%. And the panel pointed to a real opportunity for law firms to collaborate with alternative providers and then come to the firm, to the corporation, come to the prospect or current client with an offer of a combined operation between the alternative and the private law firm, and get really creative. And so there's a real opportunity here. Also, what was very interesting to me was the panel was saying that in-house law departments, for the most part, don't have a lot of data in terms of the kind of data that law firms outside are developing right now. Project management, looking at processes. What does it actually cost to bring a matter up to the point of trial? How much time does it take you to write a brief? That sort of thing. And that in-house legal departments don't really have this, because the lawyers, once again, a generalization, are judged by the number of matters they're working on, how large they are, how fast they're resolving them. And so they don't have a lot of this data, and they really want to know what outside law firms data is, because that will help them. And that we shouldn't presume, the panel felt that private law firms were under the erroneous impression that in-house legal departments had a lot of data. And the panel says, no, they don't, and they'd love to see what you have. The other thing, the other opportunity they talked about is that a lot of in-house legal departments didn't understand alternative legal fees. They understood what they were and what they were supposed to do, but they didn't understand a lot of the detail or understand a lot of the options, and that really presented an opportunity to educate them. So the key takeaways here were that communication and collaboration are key. One of the things they talked about is in terms of communication and expectations, don't presume. I mean, if you're responding to a client or a prospect, don't presume that what you think is communication is what they think is communication, because that could really negatively impact what you're proposing in fees. For example, if you believe that they mean, I want a 14-page brief every week outlining everything, and if that's what they mean about, you think that's what they mean about communication, and they mean, no, I want a phone call, then you're going to be at, cross purposes. So you really want to make sure that you understand their expectations. Nothing new. Something we all know and we've heard, but just a reminder, and it was a very good example. Less emphasis on billable hours and a much more emphasis on value, and leverage resources differently. Look at how you can work with alternative legal service providers, how you can make things work differently. So an opportunity to get very creative. And as I said, and CLOC 2 is going to be creating a category of membership for law firms, and I would say definitely look into that. When that's open, that would be something to get involved with. Okay. Busting silos, how to turn the concept of cross-selling into practice. Excuse me 1 minute, I'm just going to take a sip of water. Okay, this was Alicia Gravitz and Jamie Sheldon from Aiken Gump, and they talked about the fact that in general, in law firms, information is something we all know, it's tremendously siloed within practices. And something that everybody focuses on, or the challenge for everybody, is how do you cross-sell and how do you cross-pollinate? And they created a program where they were a successful program in terms of cross-selling. And what they did was she helicoptered over all of the business development people within the firm. So she was the liaison. Business development people are busy just like lawyers are, and nobody really just too busy. Everybody's thinking about their own little area and what they can do there, and doesn't really have time to be thinking about, well, if this is a real estate transaction, can I pull in somebody in the corporate department or the M&A department? Or how can we work together on this? How can we collaborate? So they created a successful program. It took them about a year of just laying the groundwork. And these are the things that they say to ensure success, that you want to get a rainmaker involved, because the rainmaker is going to be the entry to clients, and it's going to be a cheerleader for other lawyers as you grow this program. And you want to make sure that whether you're the administrator, the director of marketing, you want to make sure that rainmakers are aware of all the specialized practice areas in a firm, or all the pockets of expertise, even if it's a smaller firm, there are very often specialized pockets, and that you want to make sure the rainmakers know about them. Share information and make the information very easy to share. Don't overcomplicate it, and consider how you can tweak the information so that it can facilitate collaboration, and make the information accessible and usable. And with the kinds of information they talked about, for example, if somebody does a presentation, make sure that everybody knows, or the appropriate other practice areas know about this presentation, so that they might be something kind of information that they want to bring that person in on, or it's how do you educate others, and information capture, and you can't leave it to the lawyer, and you can't really even leave it to the business development person to make sure that this information, let's say it's a presentation, is put in a centralized area. Now, one thing that was interesting is, in terms of cross-selling and the challenge, people were hesitant to post their presentations because they were afraid somebody else was going to download it and give it. And so the information was posted, but you couldn't print it out. So that was their way around that. Okay, and so then how do you measure success? You measure success in different ways. First, looking at the number of practice areas serving top clients when you start as your benchmark, and then looking at that again a year later and keeping an eye on that. How many new matters have been opened, wins and losses, what additional revenue has come through the program, and what are the benchmarks for continuing this. And one thing that was successful that they talked about is the fact that at their recent retreat, they went through this process and talked about what they're doing and the kind of investment they're making and the investment in technology that also helps them facilitate this. And the partners, or some of the partners, were asking, well, what if we spend more, if we invest more, can we get more? Because they saw the success of this program. So they shared their success and how to replicate it. Here, the takeaways here were eliminate the silos of information, get a rainmaker on board, and develop an internal information sharing process. And once again, somebody has to take responsibility for that, or it's not going to happen. Okay, business development coaching. How to effectively coach your attorneys to gain a competitive edge. So we had Vicki Spang, who's Chief Marketing Officer at Shepherd Mullen, and Doug Ott, who's a consultant and a coach, talking from different perspectives about what makes the coaching process work. And how do you set the stage for success? Number one is Doug talks about getting organized. The first thing he does when he works with clients is get them organized in terms of making sure they have a database, pulling together all the business cards that may be sitting in a drawer, and putting them in something simple. It can be a CRM, but it can be an Excel spreadsheet if that's what's going to work. Not getting caught up in what kind of technology so much, but just getting organized so you can be strategic and move forward. Make sure that you they both felt that you need to let lawyers know that the coaching is optional. They're not being forced to participate. I mean, it's once again leading a horse to water. They don't have to participate. The merits of an outside coach versus an inside coach. And an inside coach knows the firm, knows the players, but may face a challenge from lawyers within the firm feeling that, well, how about confidentiality? And, you know, is what I tell you going to stay within the confines of this office, of being the person's office. And an outside, of course, an outside person says the same thing that the inside person does, but the outside person has credibility. So if you can afford an outside person, you have that credibility of somebody on the outside saying it, not somebody within the firm. Have the managing partner send out a letter saying, hey, this is what we're doing. We'd love you to participate. We think it's going to benefit the firm, but you don't have to do it, but we want you to know that we support this initiative. They talked about having lawyers pay for even a small part of the coaching, because when there's skin in the game, we all know it makes a difference. So they strongly suggested that they participate even to a small extent. And then how do you measure this? Well, you measure it with tracking, but it's not just revenue. First of all, increased revenue can be a very difficult thing to be tracking, but you can be talking relationships, the number of relationships, and having a relationship tracker that can track new relationships and where they're going, and of course originations from those being coached. But determine how you're going to measure this as you go forward before you are far into it, so you know what you're aiming for. So the key takeaway number 4 is to utilize coaching to enhance business development skills. That firms definitely see a difference, or there wouldn't be so many coaches around and so many firms using coaches. And then set up a tracking system to measure success. Okay. Next on the agenda was Pepsi-proofing your communications plan and lessons learned from corporate missteps with Zach Olson and Jean-Luc Renaud. The gist of this session was learning from the mistakes of others, basically, and the fact that the crisis, you can create a crisis just by your response. I mean, look at United Airlines, look at some of the others in terms of delaying information, in terms of making a worse crisis by your response. Ideally, you want to be have a crisis plan in place before a crisis. I mean, the last thing, unfortunately, what a lot of firms end up doing is really scurrying around when the crisis happens. But ideally, you want to have your crisis plan in place before so that you can immediately take it out and get cracking on it. Put your team together, your crisis team, and decide who's going to be on that. It doesn't necessarily need to be the managing partner. It doesn't necessarily mean that person should be on the team, but just identify who should be on. You want to be doing that again before. Who are the audiences, internal and external, that you need to communicate with right away? What are the protocols that you are putting in place? So put those in place beforehand so that it works quickly. You don't have to start putting your plan together. And then be transparent. This is very important in terms of say what you don't know, say what you're looking, we don't have that information right now, we're looking into it, and we'll alert you as soon as we have that. So that's one of the key things, and when firms aren't transparent, that's really where their own crisis can come from that. Takeaways. Don't be unprepared, have a plan, be prepared. Oh, and own the narrative, because if you are prepared and you can get in front of the story, you can own it. Otherwise, you're going to be reacting and and having to explain and backtrack, and you want to be the ones who are out in front, and be transparent. Okay, let's see. Next, business development for litigators. Okay, this was Craig Brown, who's with Law Vision. Okay, this is a very interesting session and a lot of actionable items. Okay, what Craig did was explain how litigator skills really are the same ones you need for business development, and how when he works with litigators, how if there's resistance, he's trying to explain that you're just taking the same skills you have and using them in a different arena. So to be a litigator, you need preparation, just as you do in business development. There's issue spotting, right? Isn't that what lawyers are doing, spotting the issues? And that's exactly what you're doing when you're in business development. What are the issues I can help you with? You're asking a lot of questions, same thing. Of course, that's so much of business development and building that relationship and uncovering issues. You're analyzing, okay, what's happening? Why is it happening? What happened? Where do we go from here? And then suggesting solutions. So those are all things that a litigator is doing. And when litigators sometimes feel that they can't be, they're not good at business development, it's really, you have everything you need. It's a matter of using these in a different arena. So here are the success elements for litigators in terms of business development. Focus on tight niches. There is tremendous resistance to developing a niche in litigation, because lawyers of all stripes and litigators say, well, listen, I can litigate everything. That's true. That nobody is saying you can't, but you don't have to market to everybody. You determine where you want to market, because then you're focusing your efforts, you're focusing your dollars, and you can get known. It's to say, well, I'm a litigator is really mushy, and it's hard for people to get their hands around. But if you say I specialize in the automotive industry, or I specialize in tech, then that's something people can hang their hats on. And it doesn't mean that if an opportunity comes up in an area that you're not focusing on, take it if you want. But in terms of marketing, real success comes from focusing on a niche. Okay, educate your prospects, educate your clients as to what you do, the breadth of what you do. So many times, and I'm sure you've all experienced it, somebody says, I didn't know your firm did that. I didn't know you did that. You need to educate people internally as well as externally. Referral sources. Build your base of referral sources. Now, litigators get a lot of their business from other lawyers, but a lot of times they're not marketing to that audience. So you really want to look at where your referrals are coming from and expand your relationships. And Craig talked about the fact that an internal sale is a sale. So if your colleagues within the firm don't know what you can do or don't know your specialized areas, then you need to educate them on that, because they can be selling for you. This was a key, also moving awareness to relationships. Craig talks about the fact that if you're going to write an article, why don't you talk to people, create opportunities to build relationships. If interview people for articles. There they'll be more than happy to talk to you for the most part. You'll have entree to people that you might not otherwise have entree to. And so it's how can you, the marketing things, the visibility things that you're doing anyway, how can you use them to build more relationships? And then most important is to be yourself. There's a fallacy that people successful at business development have these outsized personalities, and sometimes they do, but for the most part, they don't. And I'm sure you've all met very successful lawyers in terms of rainmakers who are very low key, but the key is that they are themselves. Okay, so business development skills, the takeaway here, business development skills are the same as being a litigator. So it's really, you're not trying to become somebody you're not. And you want to identify your unique traits and leverage those. Okay, one moment. Okay. The science of productivity, performance, and personal satisfaction. Getting things done with less stress. Judith is the perfect person to be talking about this. She's a lawyer. She works as a director of marketing. She teaches at UCLA. And she teaches exactly this. How can lawyers be happy? What do they have to do to be a lawyer who enjoys their work and be a happy human being? And so she has a company, Leader-esque. And basically, she talks about a lot of things we've heard before, but maybe have not put them into practice or haven't put them into practice within our own work environment. Increasing productivity, laugh. She reminds people that laughing is really a stress reducer. And that we need to remember to laugh. Drink water. People don't drink enough water, and even just the smallest percentage decrease in our hydration can really affect the way we think. So drink plenty of water, remain very hydrated. Manage stress by deep breathing, by clenching your facial muscles and then releasing. The little techniques that we've learned in terms of managing stress. Just calming ourselves down, taking just even a minute or two to de-stress. Okay, focusing your attention. Forget multitasking. People cannot multitask, and she went through this exercise showing us how it took us much longer to do something, a very simple task, when we were trying to multitask. So focus your attention. Just focus on what the task is at hand, and you'll be much more productive. And then know who you are. Meaning, if you're not a morning person, don't schedule big meetings at 8 in the morning. If you're not an evening person, then just make sure that you don't have big things that you need to take care of or be thinking clearly about in the evening. So know who you are. Okay. So key takeaways. Operating 24/7 has negative impacts. We can't operate 24/7, and we have to figure out how to manage what we do. And also, you have your cat video here. So take time to look at the cat videos, breathe, and take a break. In fact, this is interesting. I was just reading about the fact, I think in France, there's a law where employers can't email their employees after hours, and employees aren't allowed to return the email. Anyway, I thought, oh my gosh. So, but somebody's looking at this. Okay. All right. The last session of the day was Speak Up. Crucial conversations lead to effective outcomes, and the speaker was Cricket Lukler from Vital Smart. And the emphasis of her presentation was that we should use fact language versus story language. The fact language would be that I thought we agreed on something versus I'm starting to think that, because that's more subjective as opposed to I thought we agreed. And the purpose of this is that you avoid anger. There's confirmation of what you thought, okay, or that you thought was agreed on, and you're creating credibility. So the things that the takeaways here were using fact language. I thought we agreed. Instead of I'm starting to think that. Fact. I have noticed that, as opposed to I'm beginning to wonder if. And I have observed that versus my senses. And fact language improves productivity and creates better employee relationships and satisfaction. So those are our key takeaways from what was once again a very successful LMA CME conference. And I know that everybody here listening understands the importance of marketing. And I know that you already feel the impact of the changes that are happening in the legal world. And I know that you have the ability and the knowledge to harness the forces so that you're not swept away and that you can make these changes work for you. Thank you very much for listening, and please keep your ears open, eyes open for our next webinar.